Hey guys, Misery here, back with another CZN video, and in today's video we're going to be doing the tier list for the Selector we just recently got from the Season 3 nerfs. So this tier list is basically kind of just like a general standpoint on how valuable they are if you do not have them. Now this is just my opinion, I want to make that disclaimer. If you disagree, that is totally fine, you're entitled to your own opinion just like I am with mine. But yeah, getting straight into this video, I ranked them between 4 tiers. We have double S, we have S, we have A tier, and then we have B tier. So starting off with double S, we have Typhara, Veronica, and Hugo. I think Typhara and Veronica are very self-explanatory here. Some of the best supports in the game, and supports are very valuable in this game because if you look at the B tier, we have a ton of DPS in this game. 80% of the units are basically DPS, which make them very replaceable and not as valuable. And you may be wondering, why is Hugo in SS? Isn't he just a DPS too? Well, I think Hugo can be made an exception just how good he is, because with recent unit additions such as Hilde, Faye, or just anyone who spams a lot, even like Diana a few months ago, Hugo benefits a ton because he has a ton of coordinated attacks, allowing him to do so much damage. So even in a Hilde comp, he could easily do upwards of like 200,000 or more damage. Also, Hugo can be a draw support just like Veronica and Typhara, but most people just run him as a sub DPS and not a draw support. If you want to go draw support, then I highly recommend Typhara or Veronica. Both of those are really good for drawing, but also getting AP. Typhara has her select seed that can get a draw divine on it, and then you just can select AP from the Epiphany. She can get upwards of 10 or more AP, allowing her to be a really good AP gen if you need AP in your team composition. But also, Typhara can buff multiplicatively if you do not want her to be an AP gen. With her archetype cards, you can either choose to draw one archetype card, get a 30% multiplicative buff, or you get 1 AP. So depending on what you need for the team composition, you can just go with whatever archetype card you need. Her event horizon is also going to buff multiplicatively, and it's going to scale on how many archetype cards you use that turn to level it up. As for Veronica, she just has her draw 2 repos. I can get an AP divine, draw 2 with 1 AP, pretty solid card. Most teams in this game are going to want draw and AP. Well, every team in this game is going to want draw because draw is very important. It's basically like the center of this game. You want to cycle your entire 3 decks every turn if you possibly can, because that's how you're going to get the most value and cycle throughout all your cards. Also, depending on the deck you use for Veronica, whether you have firing preparation or not, you're going to be creating a ballista, and that can do some extra chip damage, which is really nice. But if you're just running a pure draw support Veronica, you're probably going to remove firing prep so it doesn't take up the hand slot with a ballista. Typhara actually has some pretty good dupes if you have everyone on this list already and you're trying to figure out what dupes to get. Typhara E1, E2, and E3 are all not bad. So if you use Typhara a lot, then you can go for dupes on her. Veronica doesn't really need dupes, like mainly her E2 is just like her best one, but even then it's not as valuable as it once was. And then Hugo E1 is just okay. Then moving on to the S tier, we have Orlea and Narja. And you may be wondering, why is Orlea here? Didn't she just get nerfed? Yes, she just did get nerfed, but Orlea is still a solid support in this game. She's not meta right now, but I think if you do not have her and you're missing her, she is still a solid and very valuable option to pick up, because Orlea provides multiplicative buffs. So units with high multiplier cards, they're going to benefit a lot from Orlea. But on top of the multiplicative buffs that Orlea gives, she also gives vulnerable debuffs on the enemy, which is the best debuff in the game because it makes them take so much more damage. It's a huge boost. So not only are you buffing multiplicatively, but you're also getting vulnerable debuffs. None of her dupes are really worth mentioning. Me personally, what I did, my Orlea was E3. I reset her, I got 3 spectral cubes, and then I just took her back up as E0. That's what I probably highly advise everyone to do. Just reset Orlea for the spectral cubes, and then take her back up as E0 if you do want to take her back up, because those spectral cubes are probably going to be better used on other dupes. Then moving on to Narja. Narja is pretty good in some team compositions if you're running like a Persona team comp from season 3, or even Haru Retrieve. Haru Retrieve is really strong in Haru's best build, and Haru Retrieve does not function without Narja. It desperately needs Narja. So if you plan on like picking up Narja or Haru, I highly recommend to look at your roster and make sure you have Narja before you pick up Haru. But yeah, Narja is just going to provide some draw and cost reduction for the team. She even works really well for Ren's comp, but outside of that, she doesn't really do much. If you wanted support that's buffing or debuffing such as Orlea, then I recommend to go Orlea. So Narja is more niche, but the team comps she is good in, she's the best in. And then moving on to the A tier, we just have 9 and Haru here. So 9, she's basically just like a swamp bot. Since season 4 desire cards aren't really that good or as good as Persona cards, most people are still probably going to be farming season 3 swamp, and 9 is going to make clearing swamp a lot easier because swamp has Fairy King's crown that gives 6% crit chance. That's the chest piece. It's got the weapon slot for the dagger that tricked the shadow, that's 12% crit damage. Then it has verdant shackles or verdant day/night for the accessory, which all give attack percentage and defense buff. Otherwise, if you're just getting into CZN and you're a new player at early game, 9 is going to be a really solid hard carry for early game. You basically just spam her fighting spear and her Hue does a bunch of damage. It can even shield with her Ironclad Epiphany, or it can go AoE with her Massacre Epiphany. I personally only use 9 still for farming dailies because I just have her on a Massacre deck. If I need AoE for farming dailies, that's what I just use my 9 for. As for the other A tier unit, we have Haru. So Haru's going to be really good because Haru does a ton of damage in a retrieve comp, specifically with Narja. But Haru isn't isn't just only a DPS. Haru can be turned actually into a morale bot, but not many people are going to be doing that. That's kind of just like a niche try-hard deck if you really want to go for that. But she does have some supportive capabilities. But basically how Haru Retrieve works, you're going to want to be getting Narja's decreased cost of 2 cards this turn, and then you want those to hit Haru's anchor shots. Because if you have 4 of those on Narja, then it shouldn't be a problem getting your anchor shot to 0 cost. And since it's the Haru Retrieve comp, the anchor shot just keeps coming back and back after every time you use it, because you're applying Retrieve with the anchor pointers. And since you decrease it to 0 cost, it's 0 cost that entire turn. No matter how many times you retrieve it, no, it's always going to be 0 cost that entire turn. So you can basically spam up to like 15 anchor shots with Haru in the Narja comp, easily hitting upwards of like 150k damage every single turn. I'm sure there's a few videos online of Haru doing Tower 150 because, you know, she just absolutely shreds the bosses and the health pools in Tower. But yeah, as for the dupes, Haru does not need any dupes for her Retrieve comp, and you know, 9's dupes, her E1 is okay, but I wouldn't necessarily use your Selector for E1 9 unless you just love 9. Then moving on to the B tier, most of the B tiers are DPS, so they're pretty replaceable, but if you're like a mid-game or end-game player, I highly advise to not use your Selector on 9 because, you know, units such as like Hilde, Tenebria, Haide Marie, they're just power creeping these old units from the later seasons. Unless 9 is the only one you're missing for this list and you want to go for collection purposes, then you can go for her, I guess, but she kind of is like a last resort for like a main DPS on the team, because other DPSs, like I just said, just like totally clear her. They power creep her. Tenebria is absolutely insane, and same with Haide Marie, but Haide Marie's probably going to get power crept by our next limited unit that's coming out next month, Arabella. Then getting onto the B tier, most of these are going to be DPS, so they're pretty replaceable. The first 2 are Magnet and Kalipe. These are shielders, not DPS. They're at the top because, you know, I think they're a little bit more valuable than the rest of the DPS. 9 can shield, and also if you have Adelheid, she's a shielder too. But, you know, if you don't have either of those, then I guess you could go Magnet or Kalipe because both of them have pretty solid shielding capabilities. As for the dupes, E1 Magnet is not ideal because you don't want initiation on that card. One of my content creator friends in my Discord actually told me it's worse for her, so yeah. But as for the Kalipe dupes, they're pretty good. Her E2 and E6 are going to help clear Swordy and Chaos a lot easier, especially if you're going up against a lot of units that need a ton of AoE. But ultimately, I would just look at who you're missing on your roster and go with whatever unit you don't have, and, you know, try to dim it down between the characters that you want. But if you have every unit on this list, then I would start thinking about the dupes for which character you want. You know, Kayron, Renoa, Luke, Rin, Mei Lin, you know, those are just your standard DPS. You just have so many DPS in this game that, you know, it makes getting a DPS from the Selector a lot less valuable. Now, if one of those characters are your favorite character in the game, then go for it. You know, just like choose enjoyment over meta. That's what I say in all gacha games. Go with whatever unit you like most. And the good thing about CZN is that basically every unit in this game can be used to be all content. That's the good thing. You don't necessarily need meta because this game is pretty easy that, like, you don't even need like Tenebria or Haide Marie or just like, you know, these newer units to clear. But yeah, that's going to be the end of this video. Let me know who you guys are getting with your Selector. Me personally, I'm only missing Chizuru. So, you know, I still have 2 Selectors. I still have my Selector from the half anniversary. I can't get Chizuru, but I think I'm going to wait until I lose a 50-50 for her and then use my 2 Selectors for dupes of a character I actually want. If this video was informative, I'd very much appreciate if you could show support to the channel, whether it be like, comment, subscribe. You know, it all means a ton. We're nearing 6k subscribers and I want to thank every single one of you. It truly means a ton, and I did not think we were going to get this far when I started making CZN videos. So thank you to all you guys. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments below and I'll try my best to answer them. But yeah, that's going to be the end of this video. I hope you guys take care, peace, and be safe. Until the next one.
欲望とは怪しく輝きながら己を蝕むもの。万華鏡にして覗き込めば光は止めどなく乱反射し、真実すら完美に歪んで見えるのよ。そうね、このブラックスピカーを動かしたいのね。ファーストキラーの情報が欲しいのね。声に出してごらんなさい。あなたの瞳には今何が映っているかしら。カオスゼロナイトメア、砕けた光と爪。